including moving to weighted networks. So now we start imagining that the network ties are not binary, but rather are weighted, and now you can represent the connection between every node to every other node, which affords certain methodologic advances. There was a paper in the August Journal of Econometrics on using weighted networks as instruments in a certain kind of clever way. It affords us opportunities when we do this to make both methodologic and conceptual advantages. Now, are there in fact new rules for social interactions? Do genes still matter? Does intimacy still matter? And does geography still matter? Well, even in this world, it turns out that geography still appears to matter. This was a study that was published in PNAS of 500,000 live journal users, and it shows that friendship decays with distance. Here on the right, on the left, is a probability that any two individuals will be friends, and here is the distance between them in kilometers. And you can see a kind of linear distribution here, even in this virtual world, in which in principle it's possible to befriend anyone else. Still, there's a fundamental constraint of geography on these kinds of interactions. So adding geographic details to all the other topological, covariate, and temporal detail gives us still more purchase on what is going on, socially speaking. But think of the complexity of the data here. All of these things can be changing across time, and in and of themselves are quite complicated. Now, our own work occupies a kind of middle ground space, the work that I do in my group, of networks that typically have 4-digit size or 5-digit size. 1 to 20,000 people are the kinds of sizes that we've been studying. But even here, in this kind of size, things can get much more complicated even than what I've just been discussing, because the ties themselves between the nodes on the network can become complicated, can become multiplex. For example, this is some work done with Jason Kaufman and Kevin Lewis. This just shows one of our current data sets, this Facebook network data set, which will soon become a public use file, subject to certain provisions, archived at IQSS. This just shows for a single dorm at an elite Northeastern university, 104 individuals who are connected and are close friends. They appear in photographs together on Facebook. Now, and the average number of such friends they have is 6.6, the kind of more socially tractable, kind of conventional understanding of what it means to have a friend. But in addition to being friends, they could also share membership in an ethnic club. They could be members of a club, and that could also be used to form ties. Some of these individuals might not be friends with each other, but nevertheless might belong to the same club. Or they could also be roommates. Some people are not friends with their roommates, so there's no tie between them. But you can discern a roommate tie between them. Or they could be Facebook friends, which is a kind of very lax standard for friendship, because the average Harvard undergraduate in 2006 had 106 Facebook friends. And so you can plot all these ties simultaneously in this way, and each of those ties is a different kind of a tie. And then, of course, one can expand to include the whole network, not just a single dormitory. These are 1,700 people at this college, with all the 4 different kinds of ties that I've shown so far mapped simultaneously on the network. And, of course, we are following these over time and watching how it evolves. Now, returning to the idea that things can spread on networks, going back to the example of obesity that I alluded to earlier, can we add even further level of complexity by looking at this process of diffusion? And can we take it to the next level beyond what James Coleman did in the 1960s, looking at the diffusion of antibiotic use amongst a group of North Carolina doctors, a very famous example of the diffusion through networks? Well, here is an example. There's someone called Justin Timberlake. I don't know who this is. And he was listed as a favorite artist for a number of students in this network, and the ones that listed Justin Timberlake as a favorite artist are marked in red in this network. And if you look a year later, you can see that more people like Justin Timberlake, and it's possible to discern the diffusion of a taste for Justin Timberlake through the network and begin to examine, do people adopt the tastes of other people to whom they are connected? And here we're just talking about the trivial thing like Justin Timberlake, but of course we could be interested in much more important things. For instance, the spread of health-related behaviors, financial transactions, and other kinds of things as well. Well, one of the kinds of things that could be highly relevant is a taste for privacy. And we have been doing some work looking at privacy settings on Facebook. This is an object of inquiry, but it's also of fundamental relevance to the topic we're discussing today. Here in red, we highlight those individuals who in 2006 had privacy settings set on their Facebook profiles that prohibited, for example, faculty from seeing what was on their profile, but would allow other individuals. And here it's what it's like a year later.
But not all faculty.
Not all faculty. No, well, actually, we have different kinds of ways of getting this data. So this is before, and this is after, right? So a kind of a spread and a taste for privacy on the network. And some work that we've done analyzing it, and that's forthcoming, we show that actually this taste for privacy diffuses, and that you're more likely to adopt privacy settings if people to whom you're connected adopt privacy settings, just like you're more likely to pick Justin Timberlake, or you're more likely to gain weight. Now, many of the things we might be interested in might in fact diffuse, and of course, not just obesity or taste for Timberlake or for privacy. These could include things like financial services or banking behaviors. This is not just the example of like the adoption of fax machines, where as more people adopt the fax machine, it becomes more useful, in the example that Damon Centilla often gives. But also it relates to the fact that there could be now a diffusion in the adoption of, for instance, whether you start banking or not because you start banking, or in your taste for media outlets, or your transmission of information and your interpretation of the news, and so forth. And there could be consumer tastes that could diffuse, health-related phenomena such as smoking cessation or depression in other work that we are doing. So the availability of this kind of data is increasing and will continue to increase. As Gary has already highlighted some of these ways in which we live in an environment of pervasive data, reflecting internet information that's being collected all the time, websites, query logs, links, and so forth, telephony, video cameras in cities, RFID devices. So clothing now, when you buy from a store, would have these little tiny devices. Well, maybe it'll just stay on the device until you go home. And maybe your computer will just monitor the inventory of all the clothes in your house. And now that's digitized, and that can, of course, then be uploaded and analyzed by other individuals. Administrative records, emergency room visits, crimes, toll transactions, transaction records, financial transaction records, geographic information, and a very interesting development that most of you are quite familiar with, voluntary losses of anonymity with data wikis. I was talking to one of my postdocs recently who told me that he's applying for jobs. Maybe all of you guys know this, but I asked him, he was aware of the fact that who had been inviting who for interviews and making offers, where anonymous collectives self-organize on the internet and post information about have they or have they not received invitations for interviews or been offered jobs. So everyone else can go to this wiki and see. Here's the Berkeley Sociology Search for this year data wiki, and we can see what's happening in real time. Many other voluntary losses of anonymity. Gary alluded to some blogs and the like. And of course, personal genetics, which no doubt in the next 5 or 10 years, we will have people that have increasing information about their own genetic makeup, which may be made more generally available. So, and we'll be increasingly in the situation to obtain this passive surveillance in real time. Well, what are some of the challenges that all this poses? First of all, in visualization and heuristics. No doubt, and Sandy presented some stuff I think that is incredibly important in that regard. Data management and reduction. I mean, the volume is now overwhelming. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Causal inference and new statistical tools. Gary alluded to some of them. We're struggling with some others. The issue of whether the projects are being data-driven or hypothesis-driven. And I think this is a very interesting area. I think my sense is the following. Just like there was a transition, IBM thought that the hardware was valuable and the software was irrelevant, and they were wrong, and Bill Gates has billions now. I think we're in an era now where things are changing. It used to be that the analysts, the academics who knew how to analyze data, regarded the availability of data as a commodity. And the commodity providers were of second order. And the data analysts were the primary ones. But I think the power is shifting now to the people who own the data, who will come to look at us as, well, we could have you analyze our data, Christakis, but actually, no, we'll just have someone else analyze our data or have it in-house ourselves. And so I think because of the sophistication of the data that's available, its volume and its rarity and its utility, I think we're going to begin to see some shifts. But paralleling with those shifts will be people who analyze data because they have the data versus people who have questions they want to ask and then go looking for the data to analyze it. I think maintaining the balance between observation and theory is going to be quite important. I think doing social science experiments in the new world, Gary alluded to the one in Mexico, but others, Damon Centilla and I are working on some projects to look at how we could use these kind of passive, massive, internet-based data collection efforts and actually experiment in that world. I think another challenge posed by this kind of complexity in social science data is interdisciplinarity, data security, which has been alluded to, and most important, what are we going to do with the data? I mean, is it just a wonderful toy that we have And right now we're in this exciting moment where we can draw all these pictures and grab all the low-hanging fruit off the trees, or